The hegemony's response came within 6 hours of the human fleet's arrival at the edge of Council space. Admiral Korthvan had built his reputation on decisive action and overwhelming force. When faced with an unknown threat, his solution was always the same: strike first, ask questions later. The 7th Battle Fleet was the pride of the hegemony military. 300 of their finest warships, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering that had taken decades to perfect. Admiral Korthvan commanded from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, a massive vessel that could crack planets if necessary. Unknown human vessels he broadcast on all frequencies, his voice carrying the authority of a species that had dominated their corner of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. You will withdraw immediately from Council space or face the consequences of your aggression. Admiral Korthvan had fought in the Rim Wars, crushed 3 separate rebellions, and personally destroyed more ships than most officers would see in their entire careers. He viewed the human fleet with the same contempt he reserved for pirates and smugglers. Large numbers meant nothing if the individual ships were inferior, and every intelligence report suggested that human technology was primitive at best. Captain Sam Walker received his orders aboard the destroyer UES Falcon and acknowledged them with the calm professionalism that had made him one of Earth's most respected officers. The rules of engagement were crystal clear: demonstrate overwhelming superiority while minimizing casualties. They were here to make a point, not commit genocide. Sam had started his career flying atmospheric fighters over the skies of Earth, had watched human technology evolve from crude jet engines to the reality-bending systems that now powered his ship. The transformation had been so rapid that sometimes he felt like he was living in a dream, where the laws of physics changed every few years. The hegemony fleet advanced in standard battle formation, their weapons charging and targeting systems locked onto the nearest human vessels. Admiral Korthvan had deployed his forces exactly as military doctrine required: heavy cruisers in front to absorb damage, destroyers on the flanks to exploit weaknesses, support vessels in the rear to coordinate the attack. It was a textbook deployment that had won countless battles over the centuries. Against any known enemy, it would have been devastatingly effective. Against the humans, it was about as useful as bringing swords to a nuclear war. Dr. Rachel Green monitored the engagement from the science vessel UES Discovery, her instruments recording every detail of what was about to become the most one-sided battle in galactic history. The hegemony ships were approaching at maximum velocity, their weapons systems cycling through pre-firing sequences, their shields raised to maximum power. Rachel had been part of the team that developed humanity's new weapons technology. She understood the science behind what was about to happen, but even she found it difficult to believe that theory was about to become devastating reality. The other species thought in terms of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. Humans had moved far beyond such primitive concepts. "Weapons free," commanded Captain Walker, his voice echoing through the communication networks of the human fleet. "Execute Protocol 7. Remember, we want them alive and unharmed." The engagement lasted exactly 47 seconds. The hegemony ships simply stopped. Not destroyed, not damaged, just stopped. Their engines shut down, their weapons powered off, their shields collapsed. Every system that was not essential for life support went dark simultaneously across the entire 300-ship fleet. Admiral Korthvan found himself trapped in his command chair, staring at displays that cheerfully informed him in perfect hegemony dialect that his vessel was now property of the human colonial defense force. His weapons were offline, his engines were dead, and his life support was operating under the control of some impossibly advanced computer system that spoke to him like a helpful assistant. "Greetings, Admiral Korthvan," said a synthetic voice that somehow managed to sound both friendly and terrifying. "Your ship has been temporarily requisitioned for diplomatic purposes. Please remain calm while our boarding parties prepare to welcome you aboard the UES Falcon for a civilized discussion." Across the entire hegemony fleet, similar messages were being delivered to stunned crews who found themselves passengers aboard their own ships. Not a single weapon had been fired in the traditional sense. No energy beams, no missiles, no kinetic projectiles. The humans had simply reached out across space and turned off their enemies like someone flipping a light switch. Tactical Officer Brad Turner studied his instruments aboard the UES Discovery, trying to understand exactly what he had just witnessed. The human weapons had not destroyed or even damaged the hegemony vessels. Instead, they had somehow rewritten the basic programming of every computer system simultaneously. Electromagnetic pulse? He asked Dr. Green, though he knew the answer before she spoke. Something far more sophisticated, Rachel replied, her voice filled with scientific wonder despite the military context. We are not just disrupting their electronics. We are rewriting their base programming on a quantum level. Every system that is not essential for life support is now under our control. The science behind the attack was staggering in its complexity. Human researchers had learned to manipulate matter at the subatomic level, reaching into the quantum foundations of alien technology and changing the basic rules that governed how their systems operated. It was not destruction but transformation, turning enemy vessels into extensions of human will. Captain Kelly Murphy led the boarding parties that transferred from human ships to hegemony vessels. Her orders were simple: be polite, be professional, and make absolutely certain that every alien crew member understood exactly how completely they had been outmatched. Kelly had served in the Earth Defense Force for 12 years, working her way up from enlisted ranks to command positions through competence and determination. She had trained for scenarios like this, but the reality was still surreal. Walking aboard enemy warships whose crews were completely helpless, knowing that human technology had made their defeat inevitable. "Admiral Korthvan," she said as she entered the bridge of the Eternal Glory, her voice respectful but firm. "I am Captain Murphy of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Your ships will be returned undamaged once our diplomatic mission is complete. We hope this demonstrates humanity's commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts." The hegemony admiral stared at her, with eyes that reflected a mixture of rage, disbelief, and growing fear. His species had ruled through superior technology for 1,000 years. The idea that some primitive upstart civilization could neutralize his entire fleet without firing a shot was beyond his ability to comprehend. "Impossible," he managed to say, his translator converting his words into perfect English. "Our shields should have stopped any attack. Our defenses are impenetrable." Kelly smiled with genuine sympathy. She remembered feeling the same way when she first learned about humanity's new capabilities. The transition from a world where the old rules applied to one where they had become obsolete was difficult for anyone to accept. "Admiral," she said gently, "your shields are designed to stop energy weapons and physical projectiles. Our systems work on completely different principles. We do not attack your defenses, we simply ignore them." The truth was even more devastating than the demonstration. Humanity had not just developed superior weapons. They had developed weapons that made the very concept of traditional defenses meaningless. Shields, armor, point defense systems, electronic countermeasures. All of it was useless against technology that operated outside the accepted rules of physics. Across the hegemony fleet, similar conversations were taking place as human boarding parties explained the new reality to crews who were still struggling to understand what had happened to them. 300 of the galaxy's most advanced warships had been neutralized in less than a minute by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. The message would spread quickly through galactic civilization. The humans were no longer the weak, divided species that the Council had written off 30 years ago. They had become something far more dangerous, a civilization that had solved problems the rest of the galaxy did not even know existed. The first warning came from a routine patrol ship at the edge of Council space. Lieutenant Vexashaw was completing her standard sweep of the outer systems when her sensors detected something impossible. A massive gravitational disturbance was moving through space at speeds that defied every law of physics she had learned in the academy. At first, she thought her equipment was malfunctioning. The readings showed an object roughly the size of a small moon traveling at velocities that should have torn it apart from relativistic effects. But the sensors kept reporting the same impossible data. Something huge was coming, and it was moving faster than anything had a right to move. Lieutenant Vexashaw tried to get a visual confirmation, but whatever was out there seemed to bend light around itself. Her cameras showed only empty space where her gravitational sensors insisted something massive was present. She double-checked her instruments, ran diagnostic tests, and even slapped the side of her console in frustration. Everything checked out. The impossible thing was real. Her emergency transmission to Kepler Prime sent shockwaves through the Council chambers. Within hours, every major species had dispatched their best ships to investigate the anomaly. The hegemony sent 3 heavy cruisers. The Trade Federation deployed their fastest scouts. The academic consortium launched a science vessel packed with their most sophisticated sensors. Everyone wanted to know what was happening at the edge of their carefully ordered galaxy. Commander Rick Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Endeavour and watched as reality tore open around his fleet. The slipspace tunnels were invisible to most forms of detection, but they left gravitational footprints that sensitive equipment could detect from light years away. That was acceptable. In fact, it was part of the plan. Behind him, 1,200 vessels emerged from dimensional rifts that made the Council's best faster-than-light drives look like stone knives. Each ship was larger than anything in the Galactic Registry, built with technologies that human science had developed in absolute secrecy. More ships continued to pour through the rifts in an endless stream of metal and purpose. All vessels report ready status. Commander, announced Communications Officer Amy Zhang. Her voice was steady despite the magnitude of what they were doing. The first expeditionary force represented the largest military deployment in human history. It was also the first time Earth had revealed its true capabilities to the wider galaxy. Amy had grown up hearing stories about the old days when humans struggled to reach their own moon. Her grandfather had been an astronaut who rode chemical rockets into orbit like some kind of daredevil. Now she commanded communication, systems that could instantly connect every ship in the fleet across distances that would have taken light years to cross using traditional methods. The fleet spread out in perfect formation, each ship taking its assigned position with mechanical precision. These were not the crude vessels that Earth had possessed 30 years ago. These were the products of decades of desperate innovation. Built by a species that had faced extinction so many times, they had learned to treat impossible challenges as routine engineering problems. On Kepler Prime, alarms screamed as the Council's sensors finally got a clear reading on what was approaching their space. The initial reports seemed so outrageous that several delegates demanded immediate recalibration of all instruments. No species in galactic history had ever fielded a fleet of such size. Ambassador Zethkara's forearms trembled as he studied the tactical displays. Each ship in the approaching armada was larger than the hegemony's most powerful dreadnoughts. The fleet's total mass exceeded the combined naval forces of 3 major civilizations. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases, suggesting propulsion and weapon systems based on completely unknown principles. "This cannot be accurate," he said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "No species possesses such numbers. The economic requirements alone would bankrupt a dozen worlds." Secretary Voxhi's wings buzzed frantically as she tried to process the incoming data. Her species had excellent mathematical minds, capable of performing complex calculations in their heads that would challenge most computers. The numbers she was seeing now made no sense by any economic model in their records. Building a single dreadnought-class vessel required the industrial output of an entire star system for several years. The approaching fleet contained thousands of ships that appeared to be even larger and more sophisticated. If the readings were correct, whoever built this armada had access to manufacturing capabilities that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Veltar leaned over his instruments, his crystalline features reflecting the holographic displays. His people were scientists first and foremost, trained to look beyond impossible appearances to find logical explanations. But the data streaming from their most advanced sensors defied every logical explanation he could devise. "The energy signatures are completely unknown," he reported to the emergency session. "These are not modifications of familiar technology. This appears to be something entirely new, based on principles we do not understand." Fleet Admiral Diana Brooks commanded the human fleet from the UES Liberty, a ship so advanced that its mere existence would have revolutionized galactic civilization if any other species had been able to build it. She had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, gaming out every possible scenario, planning for every contingency. The plan was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. Earth would reveal itself to the galaxy not as a struggling primitive world, but as a technological powerhouse that had quietly surpassed every other civilization while pretending to be irrelevant. The shock value alone would reshape galactic politics overnight. Diana opened a communication channel to Kepler Prime, broadcasting on all frequencies used by the Council species. Her message was brief, delivered in perfect galactic standard that had been learned through 30 years of careful eavesdropping on alien transmissions. "This is the Human Colonial Defense Force," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the light years separating her fleet from the council station. "We apologize for missing your meetings. We have been busy." The council chamber fell into stunned silence. 30 years of assumptions crumbled in a single sentence. The humans had not been ignoring galactic civilization. They had been listening, learning, and building something that none of the established powers had thought possible. Ambassador Zethkara was the first to find his voice. "Impossible," he whispered. 3 decades ago, human technology was barely capable of interstellar travel. Your species was using chemical propulsion and primitive fusion reactors. Diana's response came immediately, as if she had been expecting exactly that question. 3 decades is a very long time, Ambassador. Long enough to learn that the galaxy is a dangerous place. Long enough to realize that survival requires more than good intentions and diplomatic immunity. The implications hit the council delegates like a physical blow. While they had been conducting business as usual, holding their monthly meetings and debating trade regulations, an entire species had been working in secret to develop capabilities that made their combined fleets look like museum pieces. Secretary Voxhigh tried to maintain some semblance of official dignity. "The council requests immediate clarification of your intentions," she announced. "This unprecedented display of force requires explanation under galactic law." Diana's laugh was audible across the communication channel. "Galactic law," she repeated. "The same law that allowed the hegemony to annex 6 independent worlds last year. The same law that permits the Trade Federation to blockade planets that refuse extortionate shipping rates. The same law that has kept the galaxy in a state of barely controlled chaos for 1,000 years." The human fleet continued its approach, each ship maintaining perfect formation, while broadcasting energy signatures that suggested weapon systems beyond anything in the Council's experience. They were not acting aggressively, but their mere presence was the most aggressive act the galaxy had witnessed in generations. "We are here," Diana continued, "to discuss a new arrangement." The empty chair sat in the great hall like a broken tooth in a perfect smile. Every month for 30 years, the seat marked with Earth symbol remained vacant while delegates from across the galaxy gathered to discuss trade routes, territorial disputes, and the endless bureaucracy of keeping peace among the stars. The other species had long stopped looking at the empty space. They had given up hope that humans would ever show up. Ambassador Zethkara stretched his forearms and yawned. The meeting was running long again, just like always. The hegemony representative was a tall creature with blue skin and eyes that glowed like distant stars. He had been coming to these meetings for 20 years and had never once seen a human walk through those doors. Sometimes he wondered if Earth even remembered they had been invited to join the Galactic Council. Secretary Voxhigh fluttered her translucent wings as she read from her datapad. Her species looked like giant butterflies but spoke with voices that could shatter glass when they got angry. Today she sounded tired more than angry. "Earth sends their usual message," she announced to the assembled delegates. "They are still dealing with internal matters and cannot attend this session. The same excuse every time." Internal matters. The other species had heard it so often they could recite it by heart. What kind of internal matters could possibly take 30 years to resolve? Most civilized worlds sorted out their problems in a few decades at most. Earth seemed to be stuck in some kind of endless loop of chaos. Dr. Veltar of the Academic Consortium tapped his crystalline fingers on the metal table. His people were scientists and philosophers who spent their time studying the mysteries of the universe. They had been particularly interested in humans when first contact happened 3 decades ago. The species showed promise, they said. Creative thinking, adaptability, surprising technological leaps. But 30 years of silence had dimmed their enthusiasm considerably. "Perhaps we should remove Earth from the Council roster," suggested Ambassador Krilthak from the Trade Federation. His people were merchants who valued efficiency above all else. Empty seats meant wasted resources, and wasted resources meant lost profits. They clearly have no interest in galactic affairs. The suggestion was not new. It came up every few years when someone got tired of reserving a chair for ghosts, but somehow Earth always managed to stay on the list. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was just the galaxy's way of keeping the door open for the strange little world that had once seemed so promising. What none of them knew was that humans were listening to every word. Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his command, chair aboard the UES Thunderbolt. a ship so advanced that it made the Council's best vessels look like toys. His weathered face showed no emotion as he listened to the intercepted communications from Kepler Prime. The translation software converted every alien language into perfect English, letting him hear exactly what the galaxy thought of his species: primitive, backwards, irrelevant. The words stung, but Jake had heard them all before. Let them think what they wanted. Let them believe that Earth was too busy fighting wars and struggling with basic technology to matter in the grand scheme of things. The truth would come as quite a shock. Captain Lisa Rodriguez sat at her console reviewing production reports from the Titan shipyards. The numbers were staggering even by human standards, thousands of ships rolling off assembly lines every week, weapons systems that pushed the boundaries of known physics, defensive technologies that could stop anything the galaxy might throw at them, all of it hidden behind a wall of silence that had kept Earth's true capabilities secret for 3 decades. Lisa had been just a child when first contact happened. She remembered the excitement, the fear, the wonder of learning that humans were not alone in the universe. She also remembered the moment when Earth's leaders made the decision that would shape everything that followed. They would not rush into galactic politics like eager children. They would wait, watch, learn, and prepare. The preparation had taken longer than anyone expected. Earth's technology in those early days really was primitive compared to what the other species possessed. Crude chemical rockets, basic nuclear power, computers that filled entire rooms just to perform simple calculations. But humans had something the other species lacked: the absolute terror of extinction driving them to innovate at breakneck speed. Dr. Paul Carter smiled as he watched the latest test of their breakthrough propulsion system. The Prometheus Research Initiative had been working in absolute secrecy for 25 years, pushing human understanding of physics into territories that would make alien scientists weep with envy. What had started as desperate attempts to catch up with galactic technology had evolved into something far beyond what anyone else possessed. The test ship vanished from normal space and reappeared instantly on the other side of the solar system, not faster than light travel in the traditional sense, but something that made such concepts obsolete. The other species moved between stars like ancient sailors crossing vast oceans. Humans had learned to step through doorways. Back on Kepler Prime, the council meeting droned on. Trade agreements, mining rights, territorial boundaries, the same topics that had occupied galactic civilization for thousands of years. Progress measured in small increments, change happening at the speed of committee decisions. It was a stable system, a peaceful system, but also a stagnant one. None of them suspected that while they debated the placement of shipping lanes, humans had been quietly revolutionizing every aspect of space travel, warfare, manufacturing, and resource extraction. The empty chair in their meeting hall represented not absence, but the calm before a storm that would reshape everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. Ambassador Zethkara glanced once more at the vacant human seat as the meeting finally ended. Tomorrow there would be another meeting, and the chair would still be empty. He had long since stopped expecting anything different. Earth had made their choice 30 years ago, and apparently they were sticking with it. He had no way of knowing that choice was about to pay off in ways that would terrify and amaze the galaxy in equal measure. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Every major species sent their highest-ranking officials, military commanders, and chief scientists. The Great Hall on Kepler Prime had never hosted so many important figures at once. Fear and curiosity filled the air like competing perfumes. For the first time in 30 years, a human delegation requested permission to address the assembly. It was a formality, of course. With their overwhelming military superiority demonstrated beyond any doubt, the humans could have simply declared their intentions and left the galaxy to adjust. Instead, they had chosen diplomacy, which somehow made their display of power even more unsettling. Admiral Jake Morrison entered the council chamber, flanked by a small honor guard, wearing simple but elegant dress uniforms. After decades of ornate alien regalia and complex ceremonial protocols, the human delegation looked almost primitive in their understated appearance. But everyone in the room had seen what human technology could accomplish when properly motivated. Jake carried with him a small device that would shatter every assumption the galaxy held about technological progress and military power. The presentation he was about to give would force every species to completely reconsider their place in the universe. Some of them would not survive the adjustment. Honored delegates, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. We apologize for our long absence from these proceedings. As you may have recently discovered, we have been somewhat occupied with other matters. The understatement drew nervous laughter from some of the smaller species. The hegemony delegation sat in stone-faced silence, still processing the humiliation of their entire 7th Fleet being neutralized without sustaining a single casualty. Ambassador Zethkara had not spoken since the human fleet's arrival. The holographic display activated, showing detailed schematics of human technological achievements that made the assembled scientists gasp in recognition and disbelief. Faster-than-light drives that operated on principles completely unknown to galactic science. Manufacturing capabilities that could build entire fleets in the time it took other species to construct single vessels. Weapons, systems that bypassed every known form of defense by attacking the quantum foundations of matter itself. Energy generation methods that could power entire star systems using resources that other civilizations considered worthless. The technological gap was not measured in years or decades, but in centuries of advancement. The question you are all asking, Morrison continued, is how a species you considered barely capable of interstellar travel managed to surpass your technology by several centuries overnight. The answer is both simpler and more complex than you might imagine. Chief Scientist Veltar of the Academic Consortium leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting the holographic data streaming past his enhanced visual sensors. His people were the galaxy's premier researchers, dedicated to understanding the fundamental laws that governed reality. What he was seeing challenged every theory they had developed over thousands of years of careful study. This level of advancement should have taken millennia to achieve, he said, his voice betraying the awe and confusion that gripped his analytical mind. Our models suggest your species achieved spaceflight mere decades ago. The mathematical progression from chemical rockets to quantum manipulation should require at least 10,000 years of continuous development. Dr. Nancy Hill stepped forward, her slight smile reflecting both pride and sympathy for the assembled aliens, who were struggling to comprehend human achievement. She had spent 20 years developing the theoretical frameworks that made their technological revolution possible. The explanation she was about to give would rewrite galactic understanding of how civilizations developed. That is because your models assume linear technological progression, she said. Her words translated into dozens of alien languages simultaneously. Humanity does not advance linearly. We advance exponentially, and we do it through something your species apparently lack: constant desperation. The revelation struck the council chamber like a physical blow. Every species represented in the assembly had achieved spaceflight through gradual, peaceful development spread over thousands of years. They had solved problems methodically, built upon established foundations, and advanced at sustainable rates that preserved social stability. Nancy activated a new holographic display, showing Earth's history from the perspective of technological development. Wars, natural disasters, resource scarcity, environmental collapse, social upheaval. Each crisis had forced humanity to innovate or face extinction. Each solution had created new problems that required even more desperate innovation. You see, she explained, while your species were holding peaceful meetings and following established protocols, we were developing technology as if our survival depended on it, because it always has. The assembled delegates studied the human historical record with growing amazement and horror. No other species had faced such constant existential threats. Most civilizations achieved stability early in their development and maintained it for millennia. Humans had never known stability, never had the luxury of gradual progress. Ambassador Krilthak from the Trade Federation was the first to grasp the implications. His people understood resource management and economic efficiency better than any other species. The human development model should have collapsed under its own chaotic energy consumption long before achieving interstellar capability. Impossible, he declared, his translator struggling with the emotional intensity behind his words. No civilization can sustain that level of innovation pressure without social collapse. The resource requirements alone should have destroyed your planet. Dr. Hill's smile widened as she displayed the final piece of the puzzle that had allowed humanity to achieve the impossible. Resource management technologies that could extract useful materials from sources other species considered completely worthless. Manufacturing processes that required almost no raw, materials while producing products, superior to anything achieved through traditional methods. We learned early that traditional resources were insufficient for our needs, she said. So we stopped using traditional resources. We learned to build what we needed from quantum foam, virtual particles, and the fundamental energy that exists in empty space itself. The silence that followed was deafening. Several delegates requested immediate recess to consult with their scientific advisors. Others simply stared at the holographic displays showing human manufacturing facilities that violated every economic principle known to galactic civilization. Dr. Veltar finally found his voice. You are describing technologies that should be theoretically impossible. Our best physicists have proven that large-scale quantum manipulation requires energy inputs that exceed the total output of most stars. Your physicists, Nancy replied gently, were working with incomplete information. We had the advantage of desperation driving us to question assumptions your species never thought to challenge. When survival is at stake, theoretical impossibility becomes just another engineering problem to solve. Admiral Morrison stepped forward to address the growing panic he could see spreading through the assembled delegates. Some species were already calculating whether their traditional enemies might attempt to duplicate human methods. Others were wondering if humanity represented an extinction-level threat to galactic civilization as they knew it. We are not here to conquer or destroy, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who commanded forces that could reshape the galaxy overnight. We are here because 30 years of isolation taught us that the galaxy operates under rules that benefit the strong at the expense of the weak. We intend to change those rules. The human delegation presented their proposal with the same matter-of-fact efficiency they had demonstrated in neutralizing the hegemony fleet. A new galactic order based on cooperation rather than domination. Technology sharing that would elevate every species to unprecedented levels of capability. Economic systems that eliminated scarcity as a driving force behind interstellar conflict. It was not a request or a negotiation. It was a statement of how things would work from now on. The galaxy could adapt to human leadership, or face the consequences of trying to maintain systems that humanity considered inadequate. Ambassador Zethkara finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What assurance do we have that humanity will not use this overwhelming advantage to enslave us all? Morrison's answer was simple and terrifying in its implications. The same assurance you had when you held the technological advantage over primitive civilizations. The difference is that we actually mean it when we say we want to help. 3 months after first contact, the galaxy bore little resemblance to the carefully structured civilization that had existed before humanity's dramatic entrance. Trade routes that had been established for millennia were obsolete overnight. Military alliances that had defined interstellar politics for centuries became meaningless. When one species possessed technology that made traditional warfare impossible, President Carl Stevens stood before the rebuilt council chamber on Kepler Prime, addressing delegates who were still struggling to adjust to their new reality. Earth's first galactic representative was a former physics professor who had spent his career studying theoretical applications of quantum mechanics. Now he was implementing policies that would reshape how an entire galaxy functioned. The old system was based on scarcity and competition, he said, his words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. Species fought over resources, territory, and trade advantages because they believed the universe was fundamentally limited. Humanity offers a different approach based on abundance and cooperation. The transformation had been swift and largely peaceful, though not without resistance. Several smaller species had initially attempted to form coalitions against human dominance. Those efforts had ended when long-range sensors detected the second wave of the human colonial defense force arriving from Earth. The numbers defied rational comprehension. Conservative estimates suggested over 50,000 vessels in the new fleet, with more arriving through slipspace tunnels every day. Each ship was larger and more advanced than anything in the previous wave. The implication was clear. What the galaxy had seen so far was just the beginning of humanity's true capabilities. Ambassador Zethkara had spent weeks trying to convince his government that resistance was futile. The hegemony's military leaders still spoke of developing countermeasures and building new weapons that could match human technology. They refused to accept that their 1,000-year dominance of galactic affairs had ended in 47 seconds. Our Analysis suggests they are using some form of quantum field manipulation, reported General Vorthkes during a classified briefing on the hegemony homeworld. If we can understand the underlying principles, we might be able to develop effective defenses. Zethkara's response was tired and patient. He had been making the same argument for months without success. General, they have had 30 years to develop this technology while we remained ignorant of their progress. Even if we could duplicate their methods, which is highly unlikely, they would have 30 years of additional advancement beyond anything we might achieve. The hegemony's attempts to reverse engineer human technology had been embarrassing failures. Their best scientists could not even understand how human ships generated power, let alone how they manipulated matter at the quantum level. The technological gap was simply too vast to bridge through conventional research and development. Captain Linda Foster commanded the diplomatic escort ship UES Harmony, mediating disputes between species that had been enemies for generations. Her job had become surprisingly easy once the combatants realized that human technology made their traditional conflicts pointless. Why fight over star systems when humans could show them how to build better ones from scratch? The Rim territories had become humanity's first major demonstration of their planet-building capabilities. Worlds that had been barren rocks for billions of years were transformed into garden paradises in a matter of months. Atmospheric processors that worked on principles beyond galactic understanding could make any planet habitable for any species. Dr. Pete Johnson's terraforming innovations had eliminated resource scarcity as a driving force behind interstellar warfare. His atmospheric engineering systems could create breathable environments for dozens of different species on the same world. Gravity generators could adjust planetary conditions to suit any biological requirements. The technology was so advanced it seemed like magic to observers. The key insight, Pete explained to a gathering of alien scientists, was realizing that planets are just very large engineering projects. Once you understand how to manipulate matter and energy at the fundamental level, building worlds becomes a simple matter of applied physics. The academic consortium had been the first major faction to fully embrace the new paradigm. Dr. Veltar and his colleagues understood that cooperation with humanity offered opportunities for scientific advancement that would have taken millennia to achieve independently. Human researchers were sharing knowledge freely, accelerating galactic understanding of physics by centuries. They have solved problems we did not even know existed, Veltar reported to his governing council. Their approach to quantum mechanics makes our most advanced theories look like primitive guesswork. Working with them is like being given access to the fundamental operating manual of the universe. The Galactic Defense Initiative represented Admiral Morrison's solution to the problem of maintaining peace across thousands of star systems. The joint force combined human technology with the expertise and local knowledge of other species. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy had a unified military, capable of protecting all member worlds from external threats. The Defense Initiative's first major operation had been the liberation of 6 worlds that the hegemony had annexed through military force. The operation lasted 3 hours and resulted in 0 casualties on either side. Hegemony occupation forces simply found their weapons and ships non-functional, while human transports arrived to evacuate them peacefully. We do not seek to punish past aggressions, Morrison explained to the former hegemony territories. We seek to prevent future ones by making aggression impossible, rather than unprofitable. Ambassador Helen Wright filed her weekly reports to Earth from her office overlooking the rebuilt council chambers. The view had changed dramatically since her arrival. Construction crews from a dozen species worked alongside human engineering teams to expand the station's capacity. The galaxy was learning to function as a unified civilization, rather than a collection of competing factions. The irony is striking, she noted in her latest transmission. By avoiding galactic politics for 30 years, we forced ourselves to develop solutions that no one else had considered. Our absence made us stronger than any amount of diplomatic engagement could have achieved. The empty chair that had symbolized human isolation for 3 decades had been replaced with a central podium from which Earth's representatives could address the entire assembly. The symbolism was intentional and unmistakable. Humanity had not joined galactic civilization. They had reformed it entirely. Secretary Voxhai had adapted to the new arrangements with surprising grace. Her species valued efficiency above tradition, and the human-led system was undeniably more efficient than anything that had existed before. Decisions that would have required months of debate and compromise could now be implemented in days. The humans possess a quality that we had forgotten existed, she observed. During a private conversation with fellow council members, they approach problems as if failure means extinction. That perspective makes them willing to attempt solutions that other species would consider too risky or too revolutionary. The long-term implications were still being calculated by economists and social scientists throughout the galaxy. Human technology had not just changed the balance of military power. It had fundamentally altered the economic and social foundations upon which galactic civilization had been built for thousands of years. Captain Sam Walker patrolled the outer systems aboard the UES Falcon, monitoring the steady stream of exploration vessels heading for unknown regions beyond Council space. The galaxy that had seemed so vast and mysterious 30 years ago was now just the starting point for humanity's expansion into the greater universe. The meetings were never the real goal, he transmitted to Admiral Morrison during one of their regular communications. They were just the first step. The real work begins when we move beyond what other species thought was possible. As Fleet Admiral Diana Brooks watched the latest wave of human exploration vessels disappear into slipspace, heading for regions that no galactic species had ever imagined visiting, she understood that the transformation was far from complete. The galaxy had been just the beginning. Humanity's real destiny lay in the infinite darkness beyond, where new challenges waited to drive them toward even greater achievements. Earth had not skipped the meetings out of arrogance or disinterest. They had skipped them because they were busy building a future that the rest of the galaxy could never have conceived. Now that future had arrived, and it was more magnificent and terrifying than anyone had dared to imagine.